The attack that shook the Vatican. What you are about to hear is not just an ordinary story. It is a narrative deeply rooted in reality, but one that veers into the unknown. A story intertwined with forbidden secrets, conspiracies spanning decades, and mysteries that, if revealed, could forever change the fate of the Catholic Church and the world. Prepare yourself for a journey to the heart of the Vatican, where powerful secrets lie buried in the shadows, waiting to be unearthed. On May 13th, 1981, the world was shaken by an event that marked history: the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. Mehmet Ali Aka, a Turkish extremist, fired at the Pope in St. Peter's Square in Rome. The attack was one of the most dramatic moments in modern history of the Catholic Church, and the Pope miraculously survived. This event, dramatic in itself, will become the starting point for something much darker. Questions began to arise. Was the attack merely an isolated act of fanaticism, or something more complex and calculated? After the attack, Pope John Paul II, admired for his unwavering faith and charisma, came to be seen as a man marked by divine destiny. But as his recovery progressed, others began to question whether his survival was beyond mere chance. The official narrative pointed to a political act of violence, an isolated attempt by a radical. However, those closest to the Pope began to realize that there was more to the story than it seemed. John Paul II, between faith and secrets. John Paul II did not survive by pure luck. According to those around him, he knew too much. He was aware that his destiny was sealed, and that much more powerful forces were at play within the Church. According to some sources, the Pope had information about an imminent apocalypse, a radical change in the course of the Church and the world itself, which could forever alter the way we understand Christian faith. After the attack, John Paul II withdrew even further into the background of the Vatican, distancing himself from the media and politics, dedicating himself to a series of spiritual practices. But beyond prayer, he spent hours examining ancient documents and prophetic texts, searching for answers to a catastrophic future he believed was imminent. John Paul II knew that his position of leadership in the Church made him a target, not only of political enemies, but of forces that wished to silence what he was beginning to uncover. What was in the pages of those ancient documents was something much larger than just a spiritual vision. It was a message tied to the survival of the Church and perhaps all of humanity. The prophecy he discovered was rooted in a historical context of great change. The Catholic Church, founded on principles of faith and religious authority, was on the brink of a radical transformation. External pressures from governments, international conflicts, and social transformations threatened not only the Church, but the very idea of faith that it represented. John Paul II feared that if the correct measures were not taken, the Church would become irrelevant and vulnerable to a global shift that would bring about a new kind of apocalypse, not spiritual, but physical and political. The legacy of John Paul II and the awakening of Francis. With the death of John Paul II in 2005, the papacy passed to his successor, Pope Francis, who inherited not only the leadership of the church, but also the secrets his predecessor had kept. Francis, a man with a more progressive vision for the church, found himself confronted with a dilemma: follow the legacy of reform he envisioned, or face the truths that John Paul II had hidden. What he found was more terrifying than anyone could imagine. Francis, with his reformist attitude, soon found himself involved in a web of secret documents and discoveries that indicated an imminent crisis for the Catholic Church. He began to realize that the Church was not only facing the challenges everyone could see, such as the sexual abuse scandals or the crises of faith, but that there were dark forces at work inside and outside the Church, creating an environment where the very survival of the Church itself was at stake. Slowly, Francis began to open the doors of the Vatican to a new kind of transparency. But what he did not know was that, by doing so, he was uncovering the deepest secrets that could not only shake him, but also destroy the Church's structure as we know it. Pope Francis discovered that John Paul II not only feared for the Church, but also believed that a spiritual revolution was coming. An apocalypse that, if not addressed, would result in the end of an era for Christianity. Secrets unearthed. What Francis discovered. As Francis delved deeper into the documents and messages that had been left behind, he found himself increasingly surrounded by internal tension. People within the Church began to resist his reforms, not only because they disagreed with his vision, but because these reforms could open the door to the truth that should remain hidden. What Francis was discovering was not just about the mistakes made by the Church, but about a deeper plot, something that transcended the politics of the Church and reached issues of power, control, and spiritual survival. In the secret documents that John Paul II had left, Francis found evidence that the Catholic Church was on the brink of an unprecedented spiritual and institutional crisis. A transformative, apocalyptic change was about to occur, a global shift that would involve not only the Church, but the very fate of the world. Francis, with his desire to modernize the Church and bring it closer to the spiritual needs of the people, knew that bringing these secrets to light would mean facing powerful forces inside the Church and beyond. But what he could not foresee was how great the resistance to these truths would be. The end of the Church or the beginning of a new era. Now, with the death of Francis in 2025, the secrets remain buried, but the pressure to reveal them is growing. The Vatican remains silent, as the world watches, waiting for a change. The apocalypse that John Paul II feared is no longer a metaphor. It is an imminent reality that is about to be unveiled. The forces that have been hiding this truth will no longer be able to keep it secret. The Vatican stands on the brink of spiritual and institutional collapse, and the question remains, can the Church survive this revelation, or will it face its own destruction? We are on the brink of a new era for the Catholic Church, one that will determine whether the prophesied apocalypse will be avoided or if it will consume everything we know. The doors of the Vatican, which have long been closed, now open to the world, revealing secrets that, if exposed, could change the Church's destiny forever. The story you just heard is only a part of the mystery unfolding. We are not only talking about the Church's past, but about a future that is quickly approaching. The apocalypse may not be a single event, but a gradual process of transformation and revelation. And as the truth comes to light, the pieces of the puzzle begin to fit together, but there is something more to be revealed, something deeper, something that could change the world forever. And perhaps, just perhaps, we are closer than we think. The story has not ended. It is just beginning.